again. We're going to talk about a couple different strokes on timpani. The first is they call it legato stroke. It's much like that same snare drum technique where you want the stick to fully come up. The technique on timpani is much more exaggerated than it is on a marimba or on the snare drum. If you don't come off the drum, it produces a much different sound than when you do come off the drum. Much more so on the timpani. So the legato stroke, you want to get the most sound out of the drum. So you're using a whole lot of arm. If you think of it as swinging a baseball bat, you don't want to just use your wrists to create the big sound out of these large drums. If a baseball player were to get up to the bat and just use their wrist, that ball wouldn't go very far. So it's mainly wrist, but you can be using your arm quite a bit more for playing the timpani. And it just gives the mallet a little bit more mass to make a big full sound. So legato stroke, it's very similar to the snare drum technique of holding it. There's a French technique of playing timpani where the thumbs are on top, and a lot of the playing is in the hand. In America, most of the technique is much like snare drum. I hold the stick a little bit further back in mainly my middle finger and thumb as the fulcrum, versus a snare drum technique where you're holding with those three. So I like to hold it back a little bit more, and it gives it a little bit more play when I'm playing a timpani roll. And you want to use your fingers a little bit more when you're playing the roll. But back to legato stroke, it's just a big full stroke, and the mallet is rotating quite a bit in that hand. And for timpani playing, it's okay to come off the drum quite a bit more than you would be on the snare drum. Don't go really far out, but alright, to play quietly, you still want to have that legato stroke, but the action is a lot more closer to the drum. So you're still playing right into the drum and letting the drum resonate. Also for that legato stroke, or any of the strokes on the timpani, you have to play in the correct area. You want to play close to the rim, not directly on the rim, and not even, you say about 2 or 3 inches away from the rim. The way that timpani makes sound is the head starts to vibrate, the sound goes directly down into the round bowl, hits the edge of the bowl that way, comes to this side, and comes right back up. So when you are playing, the sound's going directly down and coming back up over there. So if you play towards the middle, the sound starts to go down, hit that side, and come back up. And if you play directly in the middle, the sound goes directly down, comes right back up, and it produces a thud versus a good full sound. I will play with where I play on the timpani. If I'm trying to create a really full sound, I will actually bring it a little bit closer towards the edge. If I'm trying to play a little bit more articulate, I will bring it towards the middle, because the drum itself will start to take away some of that extra ringing. So if I'm playing versus if I'm trying to get a little bit more of a articulate thud, you don't want to get too far close, because then that doesn't produce a good sound. Also for different kinds of passages that you have on the timpani, you want to use a mallet that's going to suit the purpose. There's really hard mallets, really soft mallets. These probably are the softest. I've actually had these since when I was in 8th grade, a long time ago, and they're still in good shape, but they'll produce a really soft sound, as something like this one, which you can't really tell. It looks all soft, but it's a very thin layer of felt that's wrapped really tightly, so it produces a much brighter sound than this one. So make sure when you're playing, have the sticks that match each other, but use the stick that best suits your purpose. The way to keep these in great shape is to not touch any of the wool felt. As I said, I've had this mallet since a long time ago, and it's still in great shape. I keep it in a plastic sleeve when I don't play, and I almost never touch the head, and I keep the drums nice and clean, so the mallet stays in good shape. And then there's a wide range of different kinds of mallets, from these that have a little bit more of a full sound to, again, these that are a little bit tighter wrapped, produce a little brighter of a sound. But the main, mallets aside, the main difference that you can make is the technique of playing. So I talked about legato stroke. More of a staccato stroke is actually you end up like snapping your wrist a little bit as you're playing. So instead of the full stroke, alright, and you still bounce off the drum a little bit, but you end up giving a little bit of that snap, and that creates a much more articulate kind of sound. So those are the main two strokes for playing the timpani. The final technique for timpani is the drum roll. Unlike a snare drum where you want to have the double stroke, a timpani roll is a single stroke roll. So that first exercise we did with the snare drum can apply to timpani as well. So you're starting big legato stroke. So that single stroke roll can apply to the timpani. You don't really need to play fast. You can play, especially on a lower drum and a lower note, you can play pretty slowly, especially if it's quiet. Alright, I'm actually not playing that fast, but I'm keeping the sticks nice and even. I'm keeping it nice and a nice legato sound. I am not playing one stick over the mallet. So you want to make sure the stick height is very similar, and it's a nice even single stroke roll between the two hands. And that's the main technique for a timpani roll. The timpani, more than any other instrument in the percussion field, the technique matters. You have to make sure you're nice and even, because if you're not, it's going to, the sound is going to change. You want to make sure you're in tune, because if you play the wrong note, then it's going to sound not great with the ensemble. So it's a lot to work on, but it's, I think, one of the most rewarding. It's the instrument in the percussion field that I enjoy to play the most, and it's a whole lot of fun.